go ahead and start now, so if you guys can please just settle in. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. Some of you I've seen before. You guys are regular at our Development Roundtable conferences. As you know, the Roundtable is a high-level speaker series where we bring in invite speakers to come to sites and really discuss some of the key topics that will shape the future of the development field. As a lot of us enter it going forward. So, as part of our fourth installment, we are very honored to have Dr. Ray Rist as come and discuss the topic on current trends in international development evaluations. If you guys were here for some of the previous roundtables, you would have noted that correct impact evaluations has been a recurring theme all throughout our field, and I think it's extremely relevant. So, and that, thank you, Dr. Rist, for being here. Dr. Rist is the president of International Development Evaluation Association, IDEAS. He is a long-time expert of independent evaluation group at the World Bank, and he has also been a visiting scholar at the Johns Hopkins University, Cornell, and the George Washington Universities. His book on evaluation is currently being taught at SAIS as well. So that being said, I would request Dr. Ray Rist to please come and address us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon to all of you. It's Friday afternoon. This is, for those of you who are not Washington natives, we are on a very auspicious day. This is Game 5 of the Major League Series here between the Washington Nationals and the St. Louis Cardinals. This is the first postseason play here since 1933. That's a long time ago, 89 years ago. And I have a friend who was at the game yesterday and is going back today. And he said, there is always work, but there are not always postseason Major League Baseball games. So for those of you who are learning of America or American culture, this is pretty deep. American culture. This is really pretty deep. And so we will be finished, I promise you, in time for the game this evening. Anyway, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. I'm going to talk to you about evaluation a little more generally than just development evaluation. I have some observations for you on the discipline of evaluation and some of the problems I think that are looming right now for the evaluation discipline. So we have a bit of time. I have 5 pages of remarks that I want to share with you, and then I would heartily welcome questions or comments as you may have them. I'm not going to use PowerPoints. Okay, I'm just going to talk to you essentially about the points that I would like to make. I am also amenable if during this time you would like to stop me and raise a question. I know you may not be, you might be a little hesitant to do that, but if you wish, please do it. I mean, I don't consider this a high formality. This is not a Nobel Prize lecture or any such thing. It's just a conversation among us. So if you have a question, please feel free. Don't hesitate. Okay, what I want to talk with you about is essentially evaluation in times of turbulence. Okay, and what does the current turbulence and the current level of destruction, decomposition, and collapse of systems around the world, what this means for evaluation. So I've entitled my remarks to you, Evaluation and Turbulence Beyond an Incremental View of the World. When the folk singer Bob Dylan sang the times they are changing back in the 1960s, there were many who took this phrase as a metaphor for the swirl of the world at that time. The 1960s were a time of counterculture and visions of exploration and experimentation with all sorts of social, cultural, and political variations on how we lived and how we might organize ourselves. Seldom did one hear of anyone disputing that change was underway. Things were not standing still. 50 years later, the times they are a-changing again. The political turmoil and economic turbulence of the past 5 to 8 years have unsettled individuals, groups, communities, and even whole countries. Indeed, the Arab Spring speaks to profound transformations that would have not been predicted 20 or 30 months earlier, such a short time ago. Likewise, the collapse of major banks, the near financial default of multiple European countries, and the crushing reappearance of so much global poverty all suggest now again that little is standing still. But what makes these two times so profound, the 60s and now these 5 or 6 year period that we're in right now, and so unsettling, is the relative social calm that prevailed between them. There has not been perpetual turbulence. The 1960s and now are distinct eras separated by a long period of perhaps 5 decades, with modest or little political and economic disturbance. Now, admittedly, there has been turbulence during these 50 years. The collapse of the Soviet Union, the reunification of Germany, and the end of apartheid in South Africa all are dramatic and suggest anything but calm. But perhaps more to the point, evaluation was defined during these 50 years, came to be a credible discipline, and was more fully evolved in countries that were relatively stable and saw the world as stable, even with the arming and aiming of nuclear weapons. Andrew Gray, a professor in the UK, speaks of quiet pasts and stormy presents. The point in stressing this 50 years of calm waters, is that evaluation as a discipline and as a profession came to maturity during this period. And this is important. Evaluation really became a discipline in this 50-year calm period. Evaluation has been defined by the time of its emergence onto the global scene, a time of relative stability and predictability, and a time where incremental change was plausible and doable. Stated differently, evaluation and the leading evaluation theorists had, in retrospect, a very naive picture of historical and political development. But here they were not alone. Other disciplines also framed their understanding of the world on the presumptions of stable and turbulent times, economics, of course, not being the least of these. And we need not even go all the way back to Marx and Engels to find evidence of this approach. Though, of course, the classic quote from Karl Marx, "All that is solid melts into the air." And that's essentially part of what we face now. The present challenge for evaluation is to recognize that the past is truly past. A new reality of perpetual turbulence is now upon us. For how long, of course, we do not know. And evaluation can and should not behave as if things are still as they were a very short time ago. There may well be another period of calm upcoming, the time of which is only conjecture, but it will not be a return to the status quo. The past is truly past. Stated differently, the evaluation community seems to behave as if it is unaware of the present turbulence. One might understand that physics or chemistry persistently operate with core theories and laws of relative stability. Gravity and the molecular composition of, say, water or salt have not undergone any fundamental change in these 50 years. But evaluation in its measurement of social action, social change, and social cohesion is yet another arena, an arena now characterized by turbulence, disintegration, and decomposition. Yet you would have a hard time knowing that turbulence is upon us if you look carefully at how evaluators behaved 5 or 10 years ago and how they are behaving now. As an alternative, one might posit that evaluators are very much aware of this turbulence, but they do not understand, or accept it, that it is also creating fundamental questions regarding the discipline of evaluation itself. So what follows now in my brief remarks are some reflections on 6 sets of assumptions that influence the current practice and belief of evaluators. Further, the tenacity with which evaluators continue to hold these assumptions, even in the face of the dynamics of our present turbulent times, threaten to undercut the legitimacy of evaluation. The consequence is that evaluation is increasingly irrelevant to the world it purports to study and seeks to understand. The list of challenges and threats is not meant to be exhaustive, but to suggest ways in which evaluators will need to rethink their assumptions and presumptions of how to carry out their craft. In this sense, the theme of this paper is for the evaluation community to be cautionary in designing and conducting evaluations. It is calling into question the assumptions that one can any longer discuss program and policy improvements, that improvements are predicated on stable systems that can be incrementally modified and changed. You understand, this was one of the major assumptions of the last 50 years, that systems were sufficiently stable and predictable that you could manage and you could design and manage and carry out incremental change. This is now fundamentally called into question. And of course, if we were in the Middle East, we would say that's a pretty naive assumption. If we are in parts of Africa, if we're in parts of Latin America, or North America itself, it would be the same. So, my 6 observations for you. Number 1, everything goes according to plan. This assumption, known with its shorthand EGAP, right? Everything goes according to plan, suggests a fundamental belief in stability, predictability, and assurance of success, given that we will be operating in an environment where changes will be small and incremental. Thus, within this mindset, one can lay out a policy or program proposal with a high level of confidence that both a good theory of change and good implementation conditions will turn out as anticipated. So evaluators stress to policymakers and program managers that they need to build strong theories of change, be careful to stipulate the change sequence of what will lead to what, and define the end result. There's a kind of hyper-rationalism here that says we can be confident of the future, confident of our ability to achieve the change we want, and confident that we can manipulate our social reality to get from A to B to C. If we want to reduce poverty, improve governance, or minimize HIV/AIDS infection rates, there are sets of plans to be proposed, policies to be followed, procedures to be followed, and outcomes to be achieved. Ironically, political and administrative systems do not seem to believe or behave in a way that suggests this hyper-rationalism still defines our social, political, and cultural reality. The assumptions of evaluators about organizational behavior seem to be stuck in place. What is disquieting is that evaluators do not seem to get it and continue to operate with now outmoded assumptions and behaviors about stability, incrementalism, and methodology. The evaluation discipline is threatened with decomposition. The examples of this overestimation of stability and rationality abound. Take, for example, the situation in the World Bank, where I've spent the last 17 years, where it has now been documented that the World Bank has incorrectly estimated the cost-benefit of many of its projects. As but one example, the World Bank assumes constant and positive growth year after year after year in its projects, failing to take into account negative growth in some years. This false assumption of constant high benefit levels leads to a positive bias in World Bank reporting on project performance. This overestimation of long-term benefits assumes stability of performance, stability of markets, and stability of sustainability. All three in reality being dubious and highly precarious. You understand I hope. Stability of performance is a precarious assumption right now. Stability of markets is clearly a precarious assumption right now. And stability of sustainability is also highly precarious. Again, it assumes all is going according to plan. Evaluators need to acknowledge the discontinuity of change and growth and plan for it in their evaluations. The signals of these incorrect assumptions also show up in the World Bank Group when it comes to estimating the time required for the implementation of projects. The actual time needed for implementation of a project in the World Bank averages 7 years. But project managers continually propose, and it has been documented, that the estimated length of implementation will be 5 years. The data show this now conclusively. Managers are persistently getting their estimates wrong. Implementation is slower, more complex, and more difficult than what would be hoped for or anticipated by project managers. Things do not go according to plan, but hope springs eternal, and the hope is wrong by almost 40%. The tendency of evaluators to assume the accuracy of projections, to accept program proposals at face value, and to be optimistic in measurement of change are all potential pitfalls. In this time of turbulence, very little goes according to plan. Point 2, longitudinal data are powerful. Evaluators constantly stress the need for and importance of longitudinal data. Indeed, there are specific evaluation designs that emphasize the importance of longitudinal data. Interrupted time series and time series being 2. The assumption being that showing trends over time illuminates change, or the lack thereof, with consistent measures with the same tools of the same population. Clearly, this assumption has multiple risks inherent in it. That the measure is measuring the same variable as last time, that the measure is understood in the same way as last time, that changes in the population can be understood with such measures, etc. The real challenge is that turbulence gets in the way of holding these assumptions constant. Accurate incremental measurement can be a false assumption at any time, but especially in times of turbulence. The point is that we are in the midst of non-incremental times, where longitudinal data are less relevant and sometimes of no relevance. Then we need to acknowledge then we need knowledge that is different than that which evaluation traditionally gives us. And here I would just call into the point that the case of the evaluation of counterterrorism is particularly illuminative in this regard. The assumptions of counterterrorism from 5 years ago to now are quite a bit different, and it just keeps moving. Point 3, that systems are rational. There has been an uptake within the evaluation community in the past few years of an emphasis on systems thinking. New books appear with an emphasis on systems thinking and showing the linkage of this approach to the conducting of evaluations. The new book by Michael Patton is probably one of the more well-known books of this type. The strength of this approach is to stress that organizations are indeed systems, that rationality is a key attribute. By the way, going all the way back to the thinking of Max Weber on this point. And that systems take one's perspective beyond the episodic and the unique. The vulnerability of this approach is that evaluators can come to hold the holistic fallacy, a key concept in anthropology, by the way. The notion that with enough work, one can find how all of the parts of a system fit together, and that indeed all the parts do fit together. This is the concept of the holistic fallacy. It is up to the evaluator to put the puzzle together. This is a risky assumption at any time, and especially in times of turbulence. Systems are not inherently cohesive, predictable, and rational. Systems can be dysfunctional, irrational, and incomplete. Again, systems thinking stresses the rational, the predictable, and the logical nature of organizations. It is predicated on the logic of engineering, where stability and interconnected parts are how you move toward construction of new structures. It assumes sufficient predictability that one can then predicate or predict on both the macro and the micro levels, as with theories of change. The task of the evaluator in such an approach is to push for cohesion, identify gaps or disconnects, and assure policy and program folks that Humpty Dumpty can be put back together at any time. For those of you who don't know the American childhood literature, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's men and all the king's horses could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again. The portrayal in my childhood book is that Humpty Dumpty was a big egg. And the big egg sat on the wall, the big egg fell off. But the phrase Humpty Dumpty is essentially now to suggest that you can always put eggs back together even when they break. Okay, and that's what systems folks tend to have as one of their core assumptions, that any system is predictable, logical, and rational, and if it comes apart, you just have to figure out how to put it back together. Turbulence calls this all into question. Okay. Point 4. Social actors are unique. The last years have put such pressure on economic, social, and political organizations that it is apparent that seldom can any one of these organizations solve their problems by themselves. Focusing on the roles and responsibilities of any one organization, asking how it is managing change by itself, and what their leadership is doing to stabilize the organization during this period of whitewater, all assume that the organization is a unique and self-contained agent. This is no longer to be assumed. The last years have seen a strong emergence of partnership and an emphasis on collaboration. A lot of the theory of new public management is also predicated on these assumptions. Essentially, the new realities have forced organizations to conclude that they cannot go it alone. They need one another if they are to survive, if they are to be successful. No single agent, for example, can be effective by itself in its counterterrorism efforts. Current research makes it clear that evaluators and the efforts of evaluation are clearly now lagging and are behind the curve in coming to understand these new interdependencies, studying how collaboration is working or not, and how shared responsibility is to be understood and measured. Point 5. Getting close. Point 5. Accountability will make things right. One of the shifts that the turbulence has brought about in the evaluation community is more emphasis on accountability, performance to standards, and performance auditing. It is as if compliance with rules, regulations, and criteria will ensure high-quality performance while one is on sand. And by the way, it's a bit of a sidebar, but to say, don't forget, you can be completely compliant and completely dysfunctional at the same time. Compliance is not effectiveness. Compliance is simply compliance. And so when you are told that you are compliant, that is not to be inferred that somehow I am effective. This is one of the intellectual slippages in some of the auditing and evaluation communities that kind of just is let go under the table. Evaluators have embraced competencies and standards with the assumption that this will increase professionalism. When change and decomposition is everywhere, when change and decomposition is everywhere, the turning to standards is seemingly only understandable in two ways. That professionalism is seen as an adequate and calming response to the turbulence,
when the evaluation community is in outward upheaval and needs to reassure its clients about its status and stature, or second, that evaluation is turning away from the chaos of the environment and seeking to turn inward to reassure and reorganize its own community. So it is either we're becoming more professional through standards and competencies to assure the clients and claim higher quality in our work, even when we are on sand, or we keep busy trying to credential ourselves to create our own class and caste system to ride out the storm. When the new calm appears, we will be more professional, more credentialed, and better prepared to again service the power brokers of the organizations that we work for. Point 6, utilization is key. The long-time mantra in the evaluation community has been that if you do not get the utilization focus right in any evaluation, you are marginalized before you begin. Thus, the emphasis on and wish for instrumental use of evaluation materials and findings. The work of Carol Weiss up at Harvard, on the one hand, when she introduced the notion of the Enlightenment model, makes the point time and again that policy and program folks are seldom influenced by evaluation findings in any kind of direct way. It's not like I read an evaluation and I change my behavior, okay? It is much more of a slow and gradual process of changing views and assumptions. It is entirely incremental. What is interesting about both the instrumental and Enlightenment approaches is that both take for granted that incrementalism is the relevant factor in these formulations. For the instrumental model, application might be direct and soon after an evaluation is finished. But to be instrumental, one needs to be close to the project or program and be able to speak of potential changes in a straightforward manner. Thus, the time frame is constrained, the focus is generally tight, and the modifications to be proposed can be quickly checked by a process evaluation, for example, to see if they have been implemented correctly. This approach is not a long-term, over-the-horizon strategy, but to be done in real time, useful in real time, and generally with short-term proposed changes. Thus, an incremental approach to change is about taking small steps one at a time and presuming a repetitious approach to evaluation. Now, the Weiss approach to enlightenment as the desired and actual outcome of evaluation is that over time, small bits of information are accumulated, digested, and then translated into changed understandings and eventually changed behaviors. When one becomes enlightened, in Carol's terms, one does not seek drastic changes, there's no Big Bang theory here, but rather reflects how current policies and procedures can be gradually moved, given the constraints in the organization, the self-interest of actors, and the limits to span of control. This approach is also predicated on the assumption of incremental knowledge growth and subsequent incremental social change. A great deal of what goes on in public policy is fundamentally predicated on both incremental knowledge growth and incremental social change. And the accuracy and appropriateness of that assumption in 2012 is what I call into question with you here today. The issue, of course, is that in times of turbulence, incremental growth of knowledge becomes suspect, incremental efforts at change are dubious, and the logic of using evaluation knowledge from a previous era in this present time of upheaval is suspect. Policymakers and program managers are right to be suspicious of evaluation information generated from the time of calm. In sum, The 6 areas outlined above suggest just some of the ways in which the evaluation community can be misled by assumptions that we're still in a time when incremental approaches to knowledge generation, incremental approaches to knowledge transmission, and incremental approaches to knowledge utilization hold true. Turbulence undercuts all 3 of these key assumptions, thus ignoring the new realities and continuing to behave as if this failed and outmoded understanding of the new global situation still predominates is simply indefensible. Putting one's head and one's methods in the sand has its consequences. Thank you very much.
So I guess we have a lot of time for questions. We're supposed to.
I didn't write a very long paper.
That was,
I don't know if you
I think
want
this
more,
would be
but-
more actually fun though. This would
Much
be more
more fun.
interesting. So we can go up till 1:45. That's our cutoff time. So we have a lot of time. So
Well,
feel free
if there
to-
are questions.
Free questions.
If there are
You
questions.
want to give the ground rules?
Yes.
I would just like you to introduce yourself so I know who you are.
And just to, we would request actually to keep the questions to maybe 1 question per person, and sort of a little favor towards the students at the end for SICE students.
Just very quickly, my name is Diana Zoli. I am faculty at Williamsburg University in Pennsylvania. I'm here on sabbatical. My concern is women in developing countries and evaluation of the impacts of development lending,
Sure.
structural adjustment programs. And with this uncertainty that you're talking about, this chaos that you're talking about,
Turbulence.
it would make it
Turbulence.
much more difficult to even begin to evaluate the impacts that all of these things are having on women
Yeah.
in particular.
Yeah.
Is there any?
Do you see the implication of this kind of turbulence for the conversation that is rampant in development about RCTs,
Yes.
randomized control trials? How do you hold an intervention constant long enough to make an assumption that the intervention has actually been what you thought it was going to be when you have all this turbulence going around you?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm just,
Forgive
my
me.
question is just, how in fact, or is the World Bank, that you know of, attempting to, in a very progressive way, look at the impact of their programs on women?
Yes, it is happening. But what's interesting is the tension inside the evaluation community is really starting to tug in 2 directions. One is to go more quantitative, more rigorous, more measurement. And you know about the recent report, When Will They Ever Learn?, which was a deep critique of the World Bank and the other IFIs about the fact of, from this organization's point of view, how soft and unrobust evaluation was when it should be strong and robust, ready to speak to real knowledge, which essentially was through RCTs. And the counter reform or the counter pressure on that approach with a lot more emphasis on case studies and qualitative research. And it's going this way right now, which is simply one more reason that I fear for the decomposition of evaluation. I am very much anxious that the center is gone or is not holding in evaluation. And when the center is gone, then you have 50 or 100 splinter groups, and nobody necessarily talks to or shares some basic core values with the others. Evaluation is, I think, on the verge of some very serious trouble. I'm about to do a book, I think, on decomposition of evaluation, but I haven't started it yet. I just ran out of time. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Juliana Lindsay. I'm a student here and also I'm on leave from UNICEF. I'm fascinated by your thought-provoking concerns, many of which I follow and share from my own work on evaluations in the field, but I would also posit that a lot of the things that you are concerned about, and you said yourself this is an issue even in non-turbulent situations, but it's even more so in turbulent situations. I think of Ghana, where I just worked for the past 4 years. It's a relatively stable country, not huge turbulence, not hugely affected by the Arab Spring or the financial crisis, and not hugely affected by the food and fuel crises before that.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, a lot of the things that you mentioned are very applicable. I mean, even RCTs, for example, are doing one there on a communication program, and it's hard to hold a controlled group constant. So I hear what you're saying about things being, about many of these observations being even more difficult in turbulent times.
Yeah.
But I think it's more just that we're human beings, and human beings are not static. We
Yeah.
have political pressures,
Yeah.
we have different ways of looking at things, and that's what makes things challenging and interesting.
I agree with your description. My only comment is Ghana is not where evaluation started or matured. You have to look at what's gone on in Western Europe, with where evaluation really had part of its core foundation. Western Europe. Yeah, and I mean, that's where the turbulence now is moving far more dramatically. North America, what the US political and economic turbulence has been these last 5 years. My point being, there are places that are kind of at the periphery, and I consider Ghana kind of on the evaluation periphery, is not the center. Even though Suli and Mary Chenery and the others are there, but it is not at the center. My point being, really, this is more about countries that were at the center and where evaluation defined itself, emerged, created its curriculum, trained its people, and produced its knowledge.
Can I just follow up in a
Of course,
small way
of
then?
course.
Would you then say that many of the observations are more applicable to, as you say, Europe and North America, and perhaps less so to parts of the developing world that were a bit more insulated? from
If
the
they were in
crisis?
fact truly insulated, I mean, there's a lot of low, below the radar screen instability, of course, in Africa. And the food crisis is probably one of the ones that we don't talk about much, but is very much, wow. I mean, if Africa doesn't sort out the food crisis reasonably soon, it's going to be a real bad situation. But I agree with your general premise. Yes, sir.
Carlos Indagocea.
I'm sorry, what, sir?
Carlos Indagocea. I'm a sociologist and a practitioner of social development.
Okay.
I meant to make a very general and unfair question, but since you're a child of the 60s and so am I think I can. You have spoken of your doubts. Are there any certitudes left?
Are there any certitudes? Yeah. And it's important just to work on it earlier as well. Change is always there. The question is how deep, how profound, and how fast. Right now, we are in deep and profound change, and it is moving very fast. And those of you that are at all tracking the Arab Spring, I mean, it's really quite amazing. Human beings, as was said, human beings are continually evolving and are complex. We are complicated creatures. I think that would be kind of a certain verity that I might say. Human beings are just continually complex characters. We don't become very simple, and surely not very predictable. Now, systems are a little different. Systems need not be stable. Systems need not be predictable. And as I said in my notes, they can be irrational and disconnected every bit as much as the tradition of systems thinking wants us to think that it's all fit together just like a bridge. We got to be careful about when we take some of these metaphors and some of these ways of thinking and these models of thinking, that somehow we can look at social behavior in the same way we can look at the construction of a bridge. They're really fundamentally different in my mind. But a lot of the way in which evaluation is taught, the way in which it is written, you would think you're simply building social bridges rather than concrete and steel ones. That's a pretty fragile assumption in reality.
Hi, I'm Molly Watts. I'm a program officer at the National Democratic Institute on the monitoring and evaluation team.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, thinking practically about some of the things you said, we try to encourage the team, people writing program proposals to think through theory of change of their
Yeah,
programs, and
yeah,
even
yeah.
getting them to do that is kind of hard.
Yeah.
So if you think doesn't define reality and maybe is an assumption, can't be
Well,
sure that isn't what
The
other
point
tack
being,
would you
I actually like
suggest?
theories of change.
Yeah.
I actually like the notion of trying to think about where you want to go. The point being, don't become too enamored of it and too seduced by it, because change has got funny ways of intruding on all of your hyper-rationalism. And the one thing about log frames and all of this stuff is the presumption of a kind of hyper-rational way of thinking about human behavior. And it's just not holding up.
So would you suggest more flexibility?
Well, I more humility, maybe. That when you do log or theories of change, I don't like the log frames. I don't talk about the log frame. I don't give oxygen to that. But with theories of change, you just constantly have to be testing them and putting them, juxtaposing them to what you see and feel and what you're hearing, because they can fundamentally fall off the track anytime. Change has surprising ways of taking place. And of course, there's the myopia. Well, we're started, we're going down the track, we've got the budget, we got the trucks, we got the computers, we got the staff, we got the offices, we got the curriculum, we got the couches, we're all ready to go. We got carpets, we got drapes, we're ready to go. And to say, no, contrary, hang in there they just won't go. Implementers love to implement. That's their joy. And if you say to them, be a little more skeptical about implementation, watch it carefully, look for unanticipated consequences, etc. That's not their forte.
Oh, Maurice, can we take her first and then maybe you?
I guess building, sorry, my name is Marie Segura, I'm a student here in the International Development Program. And based, I think, on some of what others have been asking, just in terms of the specifics of what you think an ideal program looks like, I guess is what I'm interested in. I think this maybe a little bit is what you were drawing at. But
Program.
an ideal evaluation looks like, or if you had to design an evaluation of the program for the bank, for example, given all the things you talked about that are flaws in the ways that those are constructed, what kind of fundamentals would you insist upon given the turbulence and given the uncertainty that you talked about?
I would insist on a narrative and a theory of change that is constantly open to being re-examined. I would insist on a data collection strategy where the narrative is constantly open to being revised. Okay. And I would probably take it all in no more than 2-year increments. I mean, we know enough of what 5 and 10-year planning means. It's essentially kind of a mystical set of assumptions, and a lot of it is a leap of faith. And after about 24 months out, it's a guess anyway. It's a good question. This whole conversation today is in part predicated on the fundamental disillusionment with a lot of social policy and a lot of planning that we didn't get it right. We haven't done it well. And of course, when we're doing it, we're using OPM. You guys all know what OPM is? Other people's money. Other people's money. You know, and we're burning it rapidly, we're burning it massively. We're talking sometimes about millions, if not tens of millions of dollars for projects and programs, and we fundamentally don't have very much of an understanding of what the hell we're trying to do. And we don't have much evidence-based behind it as well for our theories of change. So, you know, people are getting pretty fed up with a lot of the assumptions that somehow we can make this because we understand our systems well enough, we are rational enough, we are predictable enough, and we are careful enough that we can make these things happen. It's just not true. It's just not true. And my comments in my notes about some of the rampant optimism of the development community in the World Bank, just being one example, it is rampant optimism that we can make things happen. Oh, we'll do it in 5 years. It's just, folks are starting to say, what are you smoking? Where the hell are you coming from? You know, it's the credibility crisis is getting deeper and deeper. And evaluation is not helping speak to this. Evaluation is getting sucked in to think, oh, if we do more randomized controlled trials, we'll get tougher data, and that's what the world really needs right now is tougher data. Maybe, maybe not. That's an assumption. That is not an empirically established fact.
Thanks. I'm Nick Oakley. I was recently Director of Institutional Learning at Search for Common Ground, which is a peace building and conflict transformation organisation. I'm now with Partners for Democratic Change, where I'm their Chief Operating Officer. The question I have is, I'd like to play devil's advocate if I may. I'm just wondering whether you're focusing on turbulent times or too much in terms of creating this distinction, or at least highlighting this tension, which I think really, from my perspective, has been present in the philosophy of science and how evaluations are conducted for many, many years. I mean, you don't only have to go back to Michael Quinn Patton and his utilization-focused evaluation approaches to see the emergence of this reliance on non-linear approaches, emergent forms of evaluation. But people like Robert Chambers in the 60s, 70s, and so on was writing about participatory forms of evaluation, many years ago.
Sure.
And so I'm just sort of, and I was at also the American Evaluation Association conference last November, and I'd say, just a quick estimate, half of the sessions there were on developmental evaluation or forms of participatory evaluation. So I'm wondering whether you're overemphasizing the importance of organizations like the World Bank, and when in fact the practice and the awareness of the challenges that you described are very well known, are being engaged with, day to day in evaluation practice, and actually whether the real tension is between those who recognize the complexity and messiness and non-linearity of the world we live in, and the drivers driven by donors for accountability and evidence that they can account for the money that they're spending on their programs. And I think that you've not mentioned that. And I think for me, that is one of the more corrosive drivers that is driving evaluation down the route of randomized controlled trials, more emphasis on evaluation. And I think that I'd certainly highlight that as a danger, as a risk. But I'm not sure about turbulent times. I mean, I think you might be overplaying that, when in fact this tension is lasted for many decades.
Okay. Can I be a bit argumentative? I don't think I'm overplaying it at all. I think the structure of the American economy came very close to teetering and falling off the cliff. I think we came very close to losing the car industries out of North America. I think we have seen the paradigm in states like Nevada, where the Nevada economy is based on housing and games. gambling. That's it. I mean, we can't have a 21st century way of thinking that says things are all pretty stable and that, you know, the housing market will keep going and people will keep gambling. And that's only one state, but the point being, it's got a pretty significant part of the economy, and the thing is just about crumbled. And a lot has just about crumbled in America. The banks, we lost a couple of the really big ones. The whole financial structure just about crumbled. The housing market and the housing structure did crumble. Major industries just about crumbled. Some did. I don't think I'm underplaying it or overplaying it at all. But it is to say that this came as a surprise to most of us. Very few folks, if you look at the literature in 2005, 2006, and 2007, nobody was writing about, you know, get your money out of the market and put it in your mattress because all hell's going to break loose. And all hell broke loose. And almost everyone was surprised. I mean, because we were very comfortable in this ever-expanding economy, ever-increasing house prices, more and more money for home equity loans, because the bubble was just getting bigger and bigger. I don't disagree at all that, and I tried to say this on the first page, that we have not had perfect stability in the years prior to 2008. There's always been turbulence because the system is not perfect and the system is not well synchronized. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of lack of synchronization going on in the system all the time. The savings and loan crisis about 10 years ago was sort of a good signal as well. And then the savings and loan crisis, of course, thousands and thousands of businesses and homes went under. We've seen it before. The signals are there, and we kind of don't look at them very carefully. So your argument, I don't dispute or ignore. All I would say is the last 5 to 6 years are transformational in how serious the problems have been. And look, Mike Patton's book, I mean, that's just one of the ones. I was talking about the systems book. I mean, Mike's point is fundamentally, in stable systems, you can think about utilization. Because in stable systems, you can say, how in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, am I going to get this done, absorbed, internalized, and changed to happen? Imagine assuming that you can go 24 months out and say, change will come because this is going to stay stable enough that I've got a model to take us forward, and in 2 years we'll all adopt it. Wow. That's where I think we're apart. So I don't disagree. I just think it's actually worse right now than what we're admitting to. I think it's really pretty bad. And I'm inherently an optimist, but I think it's right now really pretty bad. And you know, the data, the consequences for this country of millions of people with sustained periods of unemployment, the consequences of that on the well-being of people, the well-being of families, the emotional well-being of children, we don't even really yet, I think, begin to understand what damage we're doing to ourselves and what damage this period of turbulence is actually doing to us. And I just think we better keep our eyes out, and I think we better be very careful in making big assumptions about what we think we can do. I mean, this is part of why there's certain silliness in this current campaign about the conversations of jobs. As if they're out there, we just got to go take them off the wall and put them up. And you know, we'll just add 50, 100,000, 5 million new jobs. I mean, last night Paul Ryan was saying in the next 48 months, we're going to get 7 million new jobs. I mean, where are they? I mean, if we could find them, don't you think everyone would want for their uncle, their aunt, their nephew, they'd want to put those jobs out there? Where the hell are they?
Paul Ryan knows what to do it.
Pardon me? Now, be careful. Be careful. I don't know. I just think, I don't think I'm understating the period of what these last 5 years are actually doing to this country, let alone if you have been to Spain, if you have been to Greece, if you have been to some of these Western European countries. I was just in Western Europe last week. I mean, wow, the conversations over there are a hell of a lot more serious and desperate than what we're even doing here. Because really, there's the Western Europe, North America axis is being shaken profoundly. And I don't think Angela Merkel is going to be able to buy, they're not going to be able to buy their way out of it any more than we're going to be able to buy our way out of it here. I'm sorry, but I just.
Do you have a question? Oh,
Yes, but this young lady here.
she's been.
Jeff.
Hi,
Hi.
Ariana with Blue Gown Hamilton. So I have a quick two-part question. One which was somewhat answered by the question on what would a good evaluation program look like. But it seems that to adapt evaluation programs away from incremental knowledge and change would be slightly more expensive. And in terms of, you know, a lot of agencies being more cash-strapped these days, do you have any further recommendations for adopting evaluation programs in that sense? And then my second part is, do you, just based on your research, do you have any, like a list of agencies or just organizations that do have good evaluation programs?
Okay. Let's go back to your first question. I am not sure I accept the premise that what I'm talking about costs more. I don't know whether it does or not. I mean, you were kind of assuming that it did.
Right.
I don't know. I truly don't know. RTCs, RCTs are expensive. If any of you have played around in that sandbox, those are some pretty expensive little interventions, and the presumption of holding your treatment group isolated from your control group, that you can ethically do all the things that RCTs need, it's not cheap. And then, of course, most of them have got 40 people in them. It's not like you're taking 5 million unemployed and doing this. You're taking 25 or 40 or 47 people. I mean, some of the big RCTs that are underway have got 47 people, and what the hell is that? I mean, this is not even one floor of people in a Chinese apartment building. I spend a month every year in Shanghai. Shanghai has an official population right now of 26 million. Mayor tells me unofficially, and it was really unofficially, that he thinks he's probably about 34 million. And that's what they're planning, their infrastructure and their water treatment, and it's about 34, 35 million right now. I mean, 35 million people in one city. Then we're talking about some, if you want change, and you want change to ripple across a society, you can't do 47 people at a time and expect change to happen. Now, I have a small part-time job that I haven't said anything about to any of you. I'm working at the Brookings Institution, and I am leading an effort in the Brookings Institution to put an evaluation in place for an initiative in Brookings that is the next 5 years, and it is essentially how to build the 21st century economy in the United States. Essentially, the US has gotten seduced into thinking Starbucks and stadiums are going to build a modern economy. Right? We got 19,000 Starbucks, we got more baseball and football stadiums all over, and that somehow that's the model of urban and metropolitan development, Starbucks and stadiums. Oh, and by the way, stealing factories and companies from other towns. So we got Starbucks, stadiums, and stealing as the way we're thinking about building the economy in this country. Brookings has gotten some very sizable money from Rockefeller, Chase, and some others to start thinking seriously about a new economy. And I'm setting up the evaluation for that effort to see about building a new economy in America. What we are doing case studies. I have observers on the field, in each of the sites where we are starting to work. I thought, and I even wrote a proposal at one point about a quasi-experimental design for that effort, and it became apparent in my naivete that the comparison groups had no data, because there are lots of parts of the American economy where cities and metro areas are not studying themselves, they don't know themselves, they're not collecting data about themselves, they don't know what the hell's going on, even in their own backyard or their own front yard. The Brookings cities are really going to become rather unique because they're going to be information rich. In a society, and we have a society where we are not information rich. We have a lot of books and websites and all the YouTube things, but we're not, our organizations are not information rich. And Brookings is systematically working with this cluster of cities to make them information rich so they know about themselves. How, for example, do you look at your supply chains vis-a-vis exports? 95% of American companies do not export. Yet 95% of the markets are outside the United States now. I mean, we have a failed model, and it's all coming home to roost. So starting to think about different ways. But my point in saying this to you is just to say we have come to a conclusion that what we need are rich narratives about the change process. And the way we are trying to build these rich narratives is through case studies. Because we couldn't even do comparisons because the comparison groups had no data to which to compare them. So,
Professor Dornsife.
I'm Salmon Dornsife.
I know.
Yeah, but maybe other people
Oh,
don't.
yeah.
And with the International Development Program here at SAIS. And I'm going to bring us back from this very high thinking, Ray, to something relatively more down to earth. I wonder what you would tell the chairman.
Are we not down to earth?
Oh, I think we're up there thinking
Really?
big thoughts. This is good. So I'm going to get us back down to something I think that's a little bit more in the realm of current day realities, rather than thinking big thoughts about the future necessarily.
I was just talking about last night.
Oh, yes, that's true. But I
And the
think,
ball game this afternoon.
oh, this is true. Okay. So then in that case, a little bit higher level than the ball game.
Okay.
And
All right.
phase. You're meeting with the chairman of the Development Effectiveness Committee at the World Bank. The Development Effectiveness Committee, for people who don't know it, is comprised of members of the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors is the institution which holds the institution accountable for its performance.
And the authority of the institution.
Exactly, the authority of the institution. So, Mr. Rist.
Yes, ma'am.
You are being called to speak to the Development Effectiveness Committee about your thinking about current realities facing the community, and you've come up with this approach. What recommendations would you make to them about the approaches that the World Bank currently uses in its evaluation practices, and what would be the 3 changes that you would recommend in priority order?
No, now Cinnamon, that's not right. That's not fair.
I know it's not fair.
I think the issue is in a sense not the evaluation community, though we'll talk about that, but it is about the manner in which donor organizations just left.
Oh,
Just could, huh?
Oh, darn.
He just left. But it's the manner in which development organizations presume they can buy change. I mean, there's a certain real hubris when you think you can buy change.
That's true.
And you can't buy change. You can't buy change. You can buy inputs, activities, and outputs. Okay? But a change model, we got impacts, I don't know if any of you can see that. This is pretty.
There's a black one over here.
I got one here.
Okay, good.
Can I have a moment?
Certainly.
All right, look, you guys. If you think about the sort of classic way in which public sector and NGO organizations and the private sector operates, it has been in this context of inputs, activities, and outputs. Okay? And this has been the world of most organizations. It's surely been the world of most public sector organizations in my experience. I worked 16 years for the U.S. Congress. I was on Capitol Hill for 16 years. And watching the U.S. government function, it was this model: inputs, activities, and outputs. Governments love outputs because you can buy or build them. Okay? You can buy bridges, you can buy clinics, you can buy immunizations, you can buy schools, you can buy post offices, any of the stuff you want to think about. Outputs are what governments like, and it's generally where governments stop, because outcomes involve behavioral change. And you cannot buy behavioral change. You cannot buy learning. And yet, you know, I mean, this is one of the great ironies about education. We spend all this money on education, but no education system will promise you that children learn. They'll only promise you a nice lunch, a nice playground, maybe a nice classroom, decent bathrooms, nice teachers, good parent participation, all this stuff. But they won't promise you learning, because you can't buy it and build it. But that's an outcome. It's the same thing. A couple examples. Learning is one. Another is safety. You cannot buy a safe city. You can buy police cars, you can buy AK-47s, you can buy handcuffs, you can buy jails, you can buy all kinds of guns, but you can't buy safety. Okay? Prisons, you can buy prisons, oh, lots of prisons. But the point being, the things in a society where we would like to see the benefits coming from OPM, other people's money, stops at what you can build or buy. We'll build more prisons, as if that's going to make you a safer society, as that's going to make it a more humane and good place for all of us and our kids. All right, you can't buy safety, you know, you can't buy health status, et cetera, et cetera. And then you got impacts, which are the long-term benefits for the society. What would we actually start to look like if we graduated all of our kids from high school? And if all of the kids in America actually started to get the human capital they needed to participate in the economy? It would look like a very different society. The point I mean, and raised by this sentiment, is that if I were talking to the World Bank, I would say, don't get stuck at outputs. This is where most development, we're going to build clinics. China right now is building 100,000 rural clinics. Not 10, not 100, not 200, 100,000 at one time. But your immediate reaction has to be, so what? Will they be staffed? Will they be open? Will they have medicines? Will they have power? What's it mean to just put up 100,000 clinics? Governments, NGOs, everybody stops at outputs. World Bank generally stops, because World Bank doesn't know how to change behavior any more than anybody else does. But yet the thinking about starting to conceptualize social change to have a behavioral dimension to it is kind of where I think we need to go. And so I would worry less about the evaluation, and I would worry more about where are you putting the money? What do you think you're buying for that money? What do you think are the benefits that you're going to get for that money? And that's where I kind of go beat up on the World
way.
Okay, thank you, good.
Okay.
I think we have time for just one more question and then he had his arm.
Sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Osberger, and I'm an official with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I appreciate your focus a little bit about what happened in the financial crisis.
Well, I was on the Hill when we went through the savings and loan crisis.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
That was the board of directors.
Yeah.
My question is this, and maybe dovetail a little bit of what you're talking about, the government, but I wrote it down so it maybe formulate my thinking a little bit. How does one go about implementing an effective evaluation on government agencies, particularly, let's say, a regulatory agency, whose job is to oversee them, and for which, for the most part, they lack any accountability, and they any accountability as to how they timely adjust to changing environment.
Yeah.
And encourage, and one more point, and encourage.
Why are you making this so hard?
And encouraging dissent within an agency, because, you know, in the feedback with the evaluation, particularly, is that you had people at the commission and in these regulatory agencies that knew things were getting out of control. And there was no evaluation process that would tell the powers that be that dissent needed to be looked at, evaluated, and respected.
Well,
and that's where I think a real big problem happened.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. But now, having said that, what are the strategies? One thing that I would recommend, and I say this tentatively because going into the SEC, going into the Federal Trade Commission, or the Import-Export Bank, any of these are pretty complex organizations, let alone trying to get inside the CIA or anywhere else. I was part of the Iran-Contra investigating team, so I say that with some carefulness and a lot of humility about trying to understand the CIA. The issue is, if they are not being held accountable, if they are essentially pretty much given, other than a couple congressional hearings a year, a chance to kind of do their own thing, then the issue is going to have to become either one, is there an internal self-correcting mechanism, which some organizations in this town actually demonstrate. Some don't, but some do. And I think the FBI is one that I think has had a pretty good self-correcting mechanism for when stuff's gotten out of hand in there. So you've got to say, is there a self-correcting mechanism where the leadership says, how did we go wrong? How do we put our train back on the rails? Okay, so there's that issue. I think there is, if you are going to do it from the external, and there is not a strong mission statement or accountability structure, then I would try to construct a theory of change about what they think they're trying to do. And then I would start a set of rather small, inconvenient evaluations about whether this theory of change is actually getting done or not. In a sense, what I would start to look at is line of sight. Or do they even know where they're going? Do they know who they are, and do they know where they're going? One organization in the US government that I rather admire in this way is the National Park Service. Those guys seem to get it right, year after year after year. And why? Because I think they have a pretty clear line of sight for everyone inside about who they are and where they're going. A lot of organizations, you can go, and the folks on the top floor have a very different notion than the folks on the middle floors, than the folks in the garage. And so I would test that kind of reality out. But again, that implies access and entree. I don't know whether you can get in the SEC to do this, or whether it would just have to be a self-correcting mechanism. Which, when I say this, these are pretty sad answers. I'm not giving you a lot of optimism, because bureaucracies tend to protect themselves, and bureaucracies tend to have gatekeepers whose full-time job it is to keep you outside. I mean, why is it that so many of the oil companies have senior vice presidents for public affairs who want you to think that the shrimp in the Gulf Coast love being around oil rigs?
you get these ads, or that Bambi likes to be on deforested land that Weyerhaeuser owns. I mean, this is what these are doing. They're trying to manipulate reality. So you got to push hard at that.
You're talking to their congressman about it.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Thank you for that question. Good. Okay. I guess we're done.
We're done. All right.
Thank you for coming.
Probably will take them up.
Yeah, but I've only got a couple minutes. This Monday is income tax day. I know. And I've got to get the final stuff for my.
You did No, I like her class. So we're one of their student projects. You're working with her class, or we're one of.
Oh my God.
Oh, you're one of her class. Well, we're kind of the same.
And this is
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So she did a terrific job. Everything.
Yeah.
Careful with stuff. So it's one of the things about
We're actually,
Exactly. This is their behavior. I mean, it's one Are they doing
It's cool.
And watch, they won't ask about those necessarily, but you know what I mean. Don't think you know. So don't be like,
Maybe we should institute CCTV. I'm just kidding. That's my answer.
Sure. Actually, so, make sure stuff like,
I was amazed at my father was disagreeing with you, but then when you got to this point, absolutely. There are, I believe, points where we can advance, which is
Yeah, that was a good question.
I just wondering if you know anything more about that.
transformational and leadership development here that takes communities and individuals.
If we don't get it here.
right, so.
Grab it.
Go back.
But I have my notes.
Then you go back and review your notes, and then you'll be prepared for that. He's very fair. And then.
And what we're doing is developing a series of trainings that plug into projects. That takes individuals, creates behavioral change, not only for the project team, but for local leaders that are moving their activities.
5 is excellent, outstanding, not
Knowledge is not
4 is really good.
Knowledge is an output. This was an
3
output.
is, you know your stuff,
If nobody does
you're very
anything with
prepared
it,
to go out
there's
and
no
do good
behavior change,
things.
then the
2
walls.
is
We
disappointing,
need,
and 1
we
is
need that,
failure.
and she's
So
going to.
none of you who take
You know,
roles for the honors
actually, what
component of
really
oral exams
happens
have ever gotten anything below a 3.
mentally,
So,
when you begin to express
yeah,
outcomes,
so.
is that you're looking into the future.
Sure.
You're
So,
envisioning
the
what
scale
can
goes
be,
from 1 to 5.
and that is
What I've
how
observed is that if.
What
you
would,
just- you
what
are
you're
actually
learning, what would a
graduating
learning school really look like?
So.
what
it's
you're
actually-
talking about is,
Yeah.
you're,
Huh?
let me just say that you're focusing a lot on this sort of evaluation of these things. When actually, it needs to be the design to create these. That's where you're.
I am not stuck here.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is called evaluation, so it's called
Traditionally, organizational stuff. And this is what folks.
Oh, on the
That's,
side.
that is.
Evaluate the training.
That is absolutely.
Directly,
So we need
his
to,
office used to be over there on John Harris.
there's a second
There was that
thing
desk.
Yeah, but that's in the middle.
that I think
Now
you're
that
really
is what
onto a
Tom
right
Gaffney
track
wants to
regarding
develop, is the executive
where the US
research
economy
advisor
goes
to
and how we
DLAC.
begin to think
Came
about
from
it.
Tufts.
Because in a lot of these
And so
development
he's helping
projects,
me with his research
they have,
projects and
they have
getting
come up with this thing of value
and
chains,
talk shows.
which I call sort of
Raising the
a,
profile of
it's
sex.
kind of
Through research and
a
talk.
meta-economic way,
Which is great.
a quick
I was
way,
talking
to
about
look
this
at what a
yesterday,
country
so he
can
told me
do.
that
The
you-
United States
I've been
has never
talking
done
with
that. And because of our political process and the way we do infrastructure
With Jill.
development
Oh,
as a
Jill
part of
Lilly
a pie that we
so as you
chop
go
up
in,
and give a
she
little bit
would
to
be, remember when the
Indiana.
Dean's
And so
Conference
rather
was?
than
Yes,
saying,
like where we had the
They
lunch
tore
with.
down the
Yeah.
chain
that is there, and
Yeah,
you
very
know,
much.
this,
And
you have to,
just,
then go
and
over the barrier of
and-
winners and losers, because that's what
Yeah, that's right.
the quote unquote free market guys, who have nothing about the free actually in their market. Right?
Well, I know I
It's
had
the
a
winners and
young
losers.
woman last night.
And I remember
And she was friends with
How does that investment
but also
go?
with-
You know, that's actually in some
When you call it
cases
the
and Amber's
Yeah, no, but they were in the same class.
Yeah.
Jan, Mary, and
And
I
that-
think also were all the same class I was.
Yeah.
That's right, because I think when
You know what I mean? Like, it's
What's school business?
They have ports, they have airports, they have areas where people have to get to research. Okay, coffee sometimes.
All right.
she's executive at it.
Yeah,
and
you
they're
have-
all there, and the
No.
bodies were bodies used to be.
All right.
No, so you're fine.
I agree with you, I think
Yeah,
like a lot of these
I
things
felt
in different, they're going to go back when they're abroad. To make it more than I actually Delhi, people in Karachi, and the same is people in Delhi, similar to the Delhi, when they are like cultural, then they are like people from Gujarat.
You try to generalization. Which is
Are we creating any outcomes as anybody?
No, I am.
But my, all I wanted to talk about is
As we get it down to the number of people trained. Yeah, we these numbers. And we, you know, how many people receive this instruction? How many books were delivered? These numerical, what do you say?
Or, I mean, there should definitely be, I hope at that point, there
You
still
don't know
jurisdictions
anything
on
if you're measuring it, just that.
Oh, of course
And you have to go above
nevertheless,
that
the
to
demand is still.
see.
we were using a lot more of our.
I enjoyed it.
And it may be that.
What's happening to the family?
Cinnamon, I gotta go.
Did the
Thank
families
you, that was
network?
great, didn't know about
And did
Brookings.
the,
Godspeed,
were the
carry
children
on.
able to
Yeah,
attend
and I think I can reach
elementary school? It's not that they were in this project and the project gave them, but what actually happened. And so it's measuring that, and then,
That's too
you
bad.
know, there are
Because there's
probably
joint,
other intangibles that probably have.
Yeah, right.
And through
evaluation needs done, but it needs to be done. We simplify it.
Phil as green cities, so there's a lot of
Collect
data
data
work
that
being
things
collected
that
in Philadelphia.
may not
So
mean
Philadelphia
anything
is
at all.
not
That's
an
it.
average city.
Well,
They're gonna have loads of data.
The cities being studied are the ones that won an RFP.
Oh,
And are getting technical assistance from Brookings.
Oh, so Philadelphia's gonna be on it.
Like four, there are four cities that are really now gonna focus on getting export strategies.
Funding. Yeah, that's keeps the big.
No.
No, that's too bad. So Oakland,
So
California.
you're enjoying your time
I think I got your
science here?
export strategy. Syracuse,
Syracuse.
Minneapolis, St. Paul, Portland, and Phoenix.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what West Coast City, Portland, I was gonna guess that next. So, all right, well, good, so great to see you.
All right, all right.
All right, carry on.
Take care.
All right, you too, take care.
All right, sir.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thanks for the sandwich.
Of course.
Thanks.
A pleasure, you're welcome.
How are you?
That was, I'm well, I was just guessing,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of our speakers come, yet time is a little odd, and so, poor Paul Collier, you know,
You
came,
might,
he was
yeah.
starved.
I'm not from
And-
this organization.
Because
I'm
he's
from a
such
different
demand.
organization.
So is Ray, I mean, so I just figured
And
he's probably
our-
like,
we're-
doesn't have time for lunch,
yeah,
they're getting
we're
something.
Oh.
So,
Working here on,
Yeah, it's true.
a
With
kind
these,
of
you know, it's happened to me
transformational
that
training. We ask the
got a bunch of
question.
lunch meetings and I
He
just
says,
forget
well,
to eat because normally
you
Yeah.
can't
I'm at
create
home.
change.
Right,
And I'm saying,
and, you know, our budget is
how would
constrained,
you
so we
create
have cookies,
change
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
with
but it's better
people?
than nothing.
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, it
What
is.
kind of
Yeah.
training would you have to get? If you
And the false
begin
assumption
with
that people would have eaten something
this
first.
sort of
Well, because it starts at 12:45, so at least it's not like
sort of
Yeah,
structure
yeah, yeah.
saying,
until 2.
Very
we
true,
are
that's true, in
survivors.
such case, yeah, that's true.
And it's
I
also
came in
We're
here
here now
15 minutes late.
because
Yeah.
somebody
It's a bit puzzling
behind
to
us,
figure out what do I
our
take home.
grandfathers,
He
our
was quite-
grandmothers,
if you
they
are
did
an
something,
evaluation
they survived.
methodologist, he
We're
would be
here.
speaking,
Our brain,
he was speaking to
our
an inside
subconscious
audience
brain
of
has captured.
Well,
evaluation.
I started my
of
career in
survival.
market research. And
So
then I
when
was
some
sent all over
development
Europe.
person
Right.
And that was
comes,
tremendous
he's
addition because
And so- and
based on
it's
that you can do a lot of
We're going
things
to
if you
do
have
this.
good evaluation. I never
And
applied
so
it to it.
his
I
brain
mean, I
is
do it
saying,
empirically with it with the NGO,
interesting, but
rather
how
than
do I
that I can help. It's
survive?
consistently asking.
I must be
All right,
careful.
so,
Uh-huh.
you know.
I maybe shouldn't
It's
do
okay,
anything.
so you improve input agriculture.
Some
But then,
people are
but then
programmed
if it's millet,
to
it's
change.
40%
It's like,
what on
we
cents.
survive.
So that's not
And-
gonna
and
get them
you
out
don't-
of.
We change and we
No,
survive.
No, I'm
Yeah.
here
And
from
some
the, nice to
people-
meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
And
are
it's just
sitting there
with,
saying,
she's
we
graduating
don't
in
change.
December,
Mhm.
and her final
Like
semester is
conservatives,
and
right? We
with
don't
an MA
change
and BA.
and we survive.
Joint degree
So
from
some
MIT.
people will never change.
Yeah.
And
You can
study
talk
at
to,
times.
it'll be
I'm in my final
very,
semester in international development.
very
But how
slow
do you
change.
combine and
So
then
the
BA
question
from
is,
MIT with the
how
MA
can
here?
we
Well, Science actually
allow
has
people
a, yes,
to
I'm
get
not
in
in,
touch with
same semester, I'm not in both
what
places,
keeps
that would be tricky.
them
That would be very tricky.
No, apparently it's been done before.
moving
Oh,
forward.
gosh, okay, didn't know that.
How is it
It's
possible?
not my thing,
Well,
but,
well, just
the
for
Science is
example,
flexible in that it has relationships with a number of different
if
schools and
you,
allows.
and it may be
dual degree
somewhat
programs.
difficult culturally
So,
for
I'm able
Korean,
to
I know
spend
for
a
like
certain number of semesters
Japanese,
here and a certain
they
number
are
of
so
semesters at the other
careful.
school and then
They're
graduate
so
at the end of
polite,
degrees.
right? They're always,
And what's
I
your-
survive by
I
being
mean, life
polite.
is serendipitous.
I
Exactly.
survive
It
by
certainly
being
is.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm going
You know,
to be
Thank you.
So what is your notion
to
of
an
what
old
you think you
white-haired
might be doing?
Like,
American